Hey soccer fans, Nick back with the Feed the Fire podcast, talking all things Major League Soccer and the Chicago Fire. Like I said in our last episode, doing a couple days back to back here to get caught up after a little bit of a 2-week hiatus. So if you're looking for a preview of the Minnesota match or recaps of the New York City and New England match, get back to the last episode. Make sure you like, subscribe, follow, rate, review, do all those things so you know when these episodes are coming out, as well as to give the show a little bit of a bump in the algorithms out there promoting these sort of things. But for today's episode, we're going to look at just some news that has occurred around the club over the last couple of weeks or so. Some things to do with contract extensions, some things to do with the stadium, as well as the league released their finalized rosters for the remainder of the MLS season. So the summer transfer window is closed, the teams are within compliance, and we now know the designations of all the players on the roster. So we're going to take a look at all of that as far as the Chicago Fire is concerned. If you want to interact with the show, if you want to reach out to me, I'm on social media at Glasshouse Soccer, as well as via email, glasshousesoccer@gmail.com. Eventually, I got to expand this Glasshouse Soccer thing and get into a little bit more content creation than just the Feed the Fire podcast. But, you know, life happens. We can only do one thing at a time here, right? Okay, let's dive into some of the meat and potatoes of this episode. What's going on with the Chicago Fire from kind of a news perspective? And I thought it'd be a good way to transition from the preview episode into kind of a news episode here by looking at Matt Doyle's article on MLSsoccer.com. This was from last Sunday, September 7th. And Doyle says of that Chicago Fire New England game, I really like watching this year's Chicago Fire, and I feel that way for the most basic of reasons. When they have the ball, they do a lot of things that make them an attractive soccer team, one that plays the game in an aesthetically pleasing way. And then he uses a video clip to illustrate a 10-pass sequence and then a 15-pass sequence leading to that opening goal against New England. But then he says, because they play this way, they can often use the ball so well, then are fearless in building out, and when in the attack, they beat New England Revolution at home on Saturday night and are above the Audi MLS Cup playoffs line. They're nearing a postseason run for the first time in nearly a decade. So he likes how they use the ball. They will push forward. They'll drive forward. But of course, we're Chicago fans. We know that's not going to all be praise when someone's talking about our teams. So here's how he concludes his bit about the Chicago's victory over the Revs. He says, I also really like watching this year's Chicago Fire for the other most basic of reasons. When they don't have the ball, they do a lot of things that make their opponents a very attractive soccer team. One that's allowed to play in an aesthetically pleasing way. And then he puts a video clip of the Revs just constantly finding space behind the Chicago Fire lines and getting 2 goals at the end of the game. And so Doyle says, because the Fire play this way, they often allow opponents to use the ball so well and are fearless when building out. They only beat the Revs 3-2, and it was a very hold-on for dear life proposition, as Chris Brady had to make a point-blank save on a late Brandon byheader to preserve the 3 points. And here's where we really get into the analysis now. Doyle continues, this is, I think, baked into manager Greg Berhalter's approach during his first season in charge. Berhalter's an ideologue, and the idea he has right now is to take this version of the Fire we can all see in that first goal above, the one where they have the ball, they're fearless in attack, they'll drive forward, and make it the version of the Fire that's on the field 90% of the time. He hasn't really been willing to give an inch to the god of pragmatism, Doyle says. That includes the post-game presser when asked about seeing a 3-0 lead almost evaporate against a Revs team not making the playoffs. Quote from Berhalter now, well, I think if we start talking about almost, we can say we almost scored 6 goals, right? Like, it's not really relevant. What happened was we won the game. We had to be resilient in the end. Doyle says, I don't disagree, but what we've seen time after time this year against the best teams in the league, the Fire are easy pickings and the most valuable real estate on the pitch. If Berhalter doesn't solve that, Chicago's potential return trip to the postseason won't last very long or even come at all. They're just a couple points ahead of the Red Bulls. So that is kind of Matt Doyle's tactical analysis, things that we've talked about, and maybe not even tactical, maybe more of an operational, if you will, a theater of combat style of thinking by Greg Berhalter there. So that's something that we've noticed in that Revs game. It really was kind of a tale of two halves, to borrow the cliche, but I think it does help illustrate what the analysts out there are looking at the Chicago Fire, and it does illustrate what opponents are looking at the Chicago Fire. They, unfortunately, if they give up an early goal to the Fire, they know that they are still in the game, that they are not going to have to be scrambling and changing tactics, changing formations, changing what they really do, because the Fire at some point are going to allow a goal. So that's something to keep an eye on as the Fire make this push to the playoff. What are the pundits, what are the analysts saying about Berhalter's approach to these games, and if he's going to change anything up as we get towards the end of this first year? I don't think he will. I don't think that's what Berhalter does. If he is going to institute any sort of changes to the Fire's identity or tactics, or introduce any new wrinkles in lineups, formations, etc., I think it's going to come in the offseason. I don't expect him to change anything right now. Again, he sees this as a long-term project. He's not hurry up and get in the playoffs this year, even though that is the goal. But they're not going to sell out on their full plan just to make the playoffs this year. All right, let's take a look at some other news from the club. Great headline to see, and for those of you who watched this week's pregame press conference on Thursday, you got to see these three players speaking alongside Greg Berhalter. 3 Chicago Fire homegrown players have signed to new contracts, and there's just a beautiful picture of Sergio Orahel, Chris Brady, and Mauricio Pineda on this article. Now, this is straight from the Chicago Fire website. It was announced on Tuesday the 16th that Brady, Orahel, and Pineda extended contracts for multiple seasons. Here's the write-up. Chicago Fire FC today announced that the club has signed goalkeeper Chris Brady and midfielder Sergio Orahel Jr. and Mauricio Pineda to new contracts, reinforcing the club's commitment to developing and retaining top local talent. All 3 players were members of the Chicago Fire Academy, rising through the ranks to earn a first-team contract as a homegrown player and making meaningful contributions to the Chicago Fire. Their new contracts mark a major step forward in the club's long-term vision and competitive ambitions. Chicago currently has 14 players from the Chicagoland area on the first-team roster, including 9 players developed through their academy. Notably, the first team has started 6 former Fire Academy players in multiple matches, a club record, and has now signed 6 new homegrown contracts this season alone. Now we get a quote from Greg Berhalter, director of football and head coach. He says, "We are proud to have so many players on the field who were raised in Chicago and represent our city and local fans. With our focus on player development and youth programming, we offer such a unique opportunity for local rising soccer players to join our pipeline to the first-team roster." End quote. And also, with the Chicago Fire's acquisition of the Chicago Indoor Soccer League, the CISL, there is even more of a talent pool out there, and more scouting and more avenues for up-and-coming players to get noticed and brought into the Chicago Fire organization. Now, specifically looking at Chris Brady, he is now under contract with the club through 2029, and there's a club option for 2030. He was the 19th homegrown signing in club history, made his debut for the first team on October 9th, 2022 against the Revs. 87 regular season appearances, and he has, what's the statistic here? He's the homegrown goalkeeper with the most first-team appearances in Chicago Fire history. So Brady is now under contract through 2029 with a club option for 2030. That is another 3, maybe 4 seasons that he can play with the Chicago Fire, at least under his contract. But what that also signals to me, though, is that if he plays one more year with the Fire and is playing well enough for a transfer, where clubs in Europe are saying, hey, this guy's even better than Slonina, this guy's even better than Matt Turner when he left New England, this guy's even better than some of these other American keepers, they'll have 2 years of control under that contract, and the Fire will be able to negotiate a very good transfer fee for Chris Brady. I think that is, from what I've read in various articles, I think his long-term goal is to go to Europe, but he understands that he still has a lot of development that he can make here in the United States, in MLS, and as you heard him say in the press conference on Thursday, playing with the ball at his feet, playing in a possession style. So once he figures that out, and I think this is a very mature thing of him, once he can get to a better level of playing with his feet and understanding building from the back from the goalkeeper's perspective, and even from a larger tactical perspective, he's going to make himself much more valuable to European clubs, to other big soccer clubs, because they're not going to have to loan him out to a club where he can learn that. He can come in and say, yeah, I know what I'm doing. I know how this looks. So he's not going to Europe because the opportunity is there. He's going to go at the right time. I think that's a very mature decision from Chris Brady and anyone who's advising him. Next up, Sergio Orahel Jr. He is now under contract with the club through the 2028 season with a club option for 2029. He was the 22nd homegrown signing in club history, and he joined the academy at U14. Let's see, helped the U19s win the first ever MLS Next U19 championship. Absolutely, this is his breakout season. He's been very much an integral part in what Berhalter wants to do with this team, with the style of play, as far as building out of the back, as far as making sure he's got a good spine up the middle, as far as making sure that the defensive midfielders are going to be able to prevent counterattacks up the middle, all that sort of thing. So Orahel, even though he had some shaky starts, there were those times where he was giving the ball away right at the top of his own 18 box, and either not being strong enough, not being quick enough to get the pass off or to react to something, and it cost the Chicago Fire goals. But in the long run, we've seen it pay off in him developing into a very competent MLS player, and one that the Chicago Fire think that he can have a future with. So that's fantastic. Again, Orahel Jr. is now under contract with the Fire through 2028 with a club option for 2029. Finally, Mauricio Pineda also signed a new contract with the club through the 2027 season and has a club option for 2028. He signed as a homegrown in 2020, has played 149 matches, including 118 starts with the Fire, 7 goals and 5 assists as a D-mid and defender there. He is the first homegrown player in club history to start every match of the season as a rookie and was named Defensive Player of the Year for the team in 2020. And that is the update on Pineda. Signed through 2027 with a club option through 2028. So Mauricio Pineda from Bolingbrook, Illinois. We've got Sergio Orahel from Evergreen Park. Born in Evergreen Park, grew up in Chicago. And then we have Chris Brady, born and raised in Naperville, all signing extensions with the club. So fantastic move for them, fantastic move for the club to kind of shore up the team in the next few years. Along with that, there was an article that came out earlier in the month. Actually, it was on September 23rd, and I won't read the whole thing, but essentially it says that the Chicago Fire have announced a new long-term academy commitment. So we have seen the proof. Proof is in the pudding. The proof is in the product here. Proof is in the players. We've seen them reward these homegrown academy players with multiple contracts because of the talent that they show, the dedication they show to the team, and what they actually can contribute to a first-team MLS club. So now the Fire, as part of this this commitment to their academy, have said that they are shifting, instead of giving traditional one-year registrations for academy players, they will be making 3-year commitments to academy players. And they say it's designed to support long-term development and promote player well-being. Academy Director Gary Lewis said, "This isn't about soccer, it's about creating the right environment for young athletes to grow, learn, and feel secure. By committing to our players for multiple years, we're taking away the anxiety of yearly renewals and giving them the time and stability they need to truly thrive." I think it's a wonderful, wonderful idea from the Chicago Fire, especially when you look at all the different avenues that players have to make it into professional soccer or the higher levels of soccer in this country, whether it be college, whether it be USL at a varying level or MLS. There's so many different pathways, and you hear so many different stories about players who are late bloomers or overlooked or this and that. And for the Chicago Fire Academy to say, we're going to look at you for 3 years. We're not just going to look at you season by season by season. Because you got to cast a wide net. When you're recruiting, when you're scouting, you have to cast a wide net. So this gives now players 3 years in an academy system to prove themselves and to show the Fire that they can be a part of the organization and positively impact the organization in some way or other. I think the Fire are going to have to be a lot more picky now with the players that they bring in. So I think it's going to be a lot harder to get into the academy just for the sake of numbers, and the sake of expenses, economics, right? You're not going to bring in the same number of people every year, because by year 3 you'll have 3 times the players, and 3 times the evaluations and cost and expense. So I think that's going to outweigh the casting a wider net. But this way, those who do get in, you can focus on your game instead of focusing on contracts. And I wonder if that's something that the club noticed. I wonder if that's feedback they got. I wonder if this is kind of a national trend that the Fire are ahead of, or at the forefront of, where clubs are saying, yeah, we're noticing that our better academy players just are buckling under the pressure of these annual contracts. And some people might say, well, you got to have that pressure if you want to play at the pro level. But they're not going to be playing at the pro level at age 13, 14, 15. That's when they have to develop and become ready to take the next step. So I understand the pressure argument. I don't think it applies in that case. So I think this is great, again, from the Fire, giving their academy players time to develop as well as time to learn their system. It could also just be a product of Berhalter coming in as the new sporting director here, where he's like, look, I need a philosophy from top to bottom, and so we're going to commit to these kids in the academy system for multiple years, so that way we can implement this philosophy over the next 6 years, the next 2 academy classes, if you will. So I think it's a great move by the Chicago Fire organization, and I hope it yields the results like we've already seen. You know, they've got the blueprint in players like Gutierrez, Brady, Slonina, Odahel, Pineda, Reynolds. You've got the blueprint there, so this hopefully is continuing down that path. And just to kind of wrap up some of the Fire news talk here, the latest power rankings have the Chicago Fire in 15th as of the 16th of September. J. Sam Jones put out his power rankings. He moved them up a spot, but did say, with the chance to put 5 points between themselves and the playoff line, with the game in hand, by the way, the Fire did not do that in a 3-1 loss to New York City. They've got 5 games to end their playoff drought. Next 3 against Minnesota, Columbus, and Inter Miami, in that order. Tough sledding. So yes, J. Sam Jones, the Fire do have tough sledding ahead. I think they can take advantage of a tired and rotated Minnesota squad, steal some points in Columbus and Miami, and then end the season on 6 points with victories against Toronto and at New England. So that, I think the Fire will end strong and end up in one of those play-in spots. To continue on with more organization news, here's the stadium news. A couple articles that I've been reading lately. Something from ABC7 says the plan for the Chicago Fire Stadium at the 78 moves forward as leaders discuss impact to neighbors, by Michelle Gallardo. Essentially, the Fire moving forward with the 78, the Chicago Department of Planning and Development kicked off that first step towards building the new stadium. And if it's approved, this would be the first time a large-scale stadium is developed in Chicago in 30 years, in 3 decades. It would be a $750 million stadium for the Chicago Fire, according to the article. And we hear from Dave Baldwin saying we want to be good neighbors here from day one, even before the stadium opens. It's an $8 billion total project. It's supposedly going to feature the stadium, businesses, parks, 5,000 new residential units, and could create up to 15,000 jobs. That's all the good publicity that they're getting right now. Everyone's saying it's going to be a good catalyst, but the big concern, according to this article and according to the people in the neighborhood, is traffic. They don't want the Chicago Fire fans getting in and out of the area to be pissed off about traffic, and they definitely don't want anyone in that area, any of the locals, to also be pissed off about traffic. So there is a lot of renderings that I was able to find on the website ChicagoYimby.com, Chicago YIMBY, yes, in my backyard, as opposed to NIMBY, not in my backyard. It's a great idea, just don't build it here. That's NIMBY. Whereas this website monitors a lot of Chicago buildings, design, architecture. They got some cool data points too. If you're kind of like an architecture or building nerd a little bit, go to ChicagoYimby.com and play around with some of their data stuff. It's fun. You can identify buildings that are before this year, built after this year, that are this much money, not this much money. It's kind of cool how they do all these interactive maps. But anyway, when you look at the renderings on their or the proposed drawings on their website, they're saying, like, the first one that shows up is pedestrian circulation. Where are all the walkways? And then number two is, where's the traffic access? And you can see the water taxi stop, you can see the rideshare stop. They have a dedicated bicycle parking spot. There's a divvy spot as well. There's dedicated bike lanes. There's even going to be upper and lower level roadways for parking coming down LaSalle Street there. They will be closing off part of Wells Street during the games, as well as some of the way into, LaSalle Street. Wells Street. They will be closing off parts of Wells Street during games. They even are going to break down the entire 78 development into 5 districts. I'll say 5 districts. There's 4 on the map. The 5th one is the stadium. Or maybe I should say the first one is the stadium. But they're going to have the Fire Line district, which is like all the pregame stuff that's going to go on there. They have the Courtyards district, which is going to have the residential units, some recreational facilities. Then there's the Wilds unit, which is a lot of the green space. It goes all the way down the east side of the lot to the river, so maybe there's even going to be some kind of river access there. And then there's the River District, which runs the whole length of the river of the 78, where there's going to be social gathering places, green spaces, water taxi pickup, all sorts of fun pregame stuff down there too. So they've got different districts mapped out. They've got the different urban spaces mapped out on here. There's a lot going on, but here's what the article says here. It says the Chicago Plan Commission on Thursday approved rezoning to allow construction of the new 22,000-seat soccer stadium for Chicago Fire Football Club. Zoning committee and full city council approval are the next steps towards getting shovels in the ground. I know Chicago's got a history of red tape, but I think this one should move as quickly as it can. That's just my opinion. The Chicago Fire also announced this week they've assembled another team with Pepper Construction, GMA Construction, and All Construction Group collaborating as general contractors on the stadium, which will be the anchor of the 78 spot. Let's see. What else is there of note here to see? A lot of great computer renderings and images. There's a cool riverfront cross section that's going to show you how kind of the levels where there's the walkways, the green spaces, some of the soccer fields that are going to be there, where the roadway is, where the bike path is. It looks like the bike path is actually going to be separated from the roadway by a row of trees, which would be fantastic. As far as people opposed to the plan, though, the main concerns are transportation and infrastructure concerns around the stadium, an issue many in attendance acknowledged needed to be addressed. So that is going to drive the conversation and especially drive the opposition. The article says that there's concern from some that the plans for the stadium are moving too quickly, having just been announced 3 months prior, and once again, that point was acknowledged by commission members. Sentiment seems to hinge on taking advantage of the $650 million in private money. So ABC reported $750 million. We've all heard $650 million since they made the announcement. And the sooner Mansueto can get started on this project, the better it is for the city. Many people spoke in defense of the Chinatown neighborhood, with complaints from residents who fear being forced out by the new development, and many not having been informed of the proposal at all. The alderman of the 3rd Ward, Pat Dow, pushed back on those claims, citing that 9 community meetings have already been held, more to come, and community engagement will continue as the project evolves. It's an appropriate step forward, she says, despite the 3-month proposed timeline. Many are eager to get a long derelict site developed. That's a great quote from Chicago Yimby right there. She, like many, are eager to get a long derelict site developed. However, 11th Ward Alderman Nicole Lee did push back on it. She asked the commission not to view the negative voices for Chinatown community as representative of her constituents. She disagreed with sentiment that there would be mass displacement of residents. Oh, so she's pushing back on the criticism. And when pointing out that she's a lifelong Chinatown resident, made the point that many of those speaking for the community were not. Like, she went on to assure constituents that she would see to mitigating any harm the new development might bring, and encouraged the development team to include the Asian community in the project. So it's actually kind of funny. because it's on Chicago Yimby that everyone seems to be in support of this, except the people who it will be in their backyard. Maybe not their backyard, maybe their neighbor's yard, right? Because Chinatown and the 78 are separate neighborhoods. The 78 has been open and undeveloped for a period of years. And while I can understand the people in Chinatown worrying about being displaced, I don't think they'll be displaced from a home standpoint, a residential standpoint. I hope that there's not going to be some sort of massive reassessment and all of a sudden they can't afford their property taxes there. That's something that's going to have to be worked out for sure. But I know a lot of people are worried about their businesses being put out because everyone will just be going to shop at the 78 and eating at their restaurants, buying at their stores, taking part in whatever services are rendered there versus Chinatown and the surrounding neighborhoods. I think it's very similar to the argument that the businesses in downtown Arlington Heights are making when the Bears are planning to build a new stadium at former Arlington Park in Arlington Heights. They're saying no one's going to come downtown. We're going to lose all our business to Bears Village or mini Bears Town, whatever you want to call it. But I think, if these teams are going to be building there, like there's no way you're going to stop it. So you need to work with them to make sure that it's not a zero-sum game here. It's not you got your slice of the pie is going to get smaller, but you could probably attract even more people to your businesses if you do it the right way, if you partner with the Fire or the Bears or something like that. So again, go over to chicagoyimby.com, see the renderings, see the plans, look at the various pedestrian networks, bicycle networks, the districts, the cross sections of the riverfront. All very cool stuff, and again, it is anticipated to be ready for the 2028 season. All right, my throat is dry, my tongue is sticking to the roof of my mouth, but I got one more thing to talk to you guys about. I've been talking a mile a minute. Can you tell that it's Friday night? I'm just kind of getting all that anxious energy from the week out. Also, I'm coaching youth soccer in the morning, so that's going to be even more fun. A nice 9 a.m. game with a bunch of first graders. Going to be a lot of fun. Can't wait to tell you stories on the next episode. But the last bit of news we got to talk about here. Club roster profiles have been released. The league has put out the finalized rosters for the remainder of the season. And the Chicago Fire's roster is as follows. Our two designated players, Jonathan Bamba and Hugo Kuipers. The U22 initiative players, again, the Fire picked the 2DP 4U22 initiative player model. So they got their 4 U22s are Leo Barroso, Jay Davila, Brian Gutierrez, Yorgos Koutsias, and Victor Radojevic. Now, because Koutsias is unavailable for the MLS season, because he is out on loan to FC Lugano, he does not occupy one of those 4 U22 spots. So that's why I read you 5 names. As far as TAM, targeted allocation money player, they have 5 designated: Kellen Acosta, Jack Elliott, Romanique Kwame, Chris Mueller, and Philip Zinkernagel. So obviously with Mueller being on season-ending injury list and being unavailable, they were able to bring someone else in with the same or lower salary as Mueller. And maybe that's a good thing that he was such a high-paid player, because they could bring in someone at a higher pay rate and theoretically get a better player. The remaining names on the senior roster: Tom Barlow, Chris Brady, Andre Franco on loan, Chase Gasper, Omar Gonzalez, Andrew Gutman, Marin Haile Selassie, Mauricio Pineda, Sam Rogers, and Joel Waterman. Also, if you go to the MLS communications page and look up this chart, it also gives you all their contract years, when their contracts are up, and what option years they have left as well. On the supplemental roster, we got Dean Bolts, who's away on loan, Dylan Borso, homegrown, Chris Cups, homegrown, Jonathan Dean, Jeffrey Gall, Omari Glasgow, who is unavailable as he is out on loan, Sergio Orahel, homegrown, David Pareba, Justin Reynolds, homegrown, Sam Williams, homegrown. So think about that. On the supplemental roster, you have Cups, who's made a few starts and appearances, Dean, who's been starting a lot, Glasgow, who's made contributions, Orahel, who's was a starter at the beginning of the season, as well as Reynolds and Sam Williams, who've made a few appearances here too. So the supplemental roster is getting work done. I think that's really good for the depth and the future of the Chicago Fire. Now, supplemental spot 31, this extra one is Brian Dowd, goalkeeper who is out on loan, I think playing in the USL, and off-roster unavailable, Robert Tredain. That is his designation. Off-roster unavailable, the homegrown 15-year-old who just signed supposedly the second biggest homegrown contract in all of MLS behind Kevin Sullivan of Philadelphia. So they still haven't released the general allocation money that's available for 2025. That is going to be coming out next week, the week of September 22nd. But yeah, that is the breakdown for the roster. Now, a couple other things to remember with the roster rules. Hugo Kuipers and Jonathan Bamba, as the designated players, they cannot be converted from a DP to a non-DP by using targeted allocation money. And I think that is because the transfer fee was too high. There's no way they could ever be bought down by TAM as you hear it. The other thing to remember in the Chicago Fire roster, players like Glasgow and Koutsias, who are away on loan, it says they are currently unavailable and a club may receive a roster or international spot relief, but not salary or budget relief unless otherwise determined pursuant to the loan agreement. So just because they loaned Koutsias out to Lugano, just because Glasgow got loaned out to another club, doesn't mean their money disappears from the salary cap. It's still there unless something's agreed upon in the loan deal. Other things to keep in mind, in addition to international roster slots, each Canadian club is permitted to designate up to 3 international players who have been under contract with MLS and registered with one or more Canadian clubs for at least a year, who will not count toward the club's international roster spot. So that's a Canadian-friendly rule there to make sure that they are not getting ripped off by the international roster spot rule. Let's see, homegrowns are only designated for supplemental roster spots or off-roster homegrowns. The targeted allocation money, TAM, a TAM player is whose salary budget charge is above the maximum salary budget charge of $743,750, but and at or below the maximum TAM amount, which is $1,743,750. So if they are between essentially 743 and $1,743,000, they can use that targeted allocation money. They get that TAM standing there. Let's see. There's permanent transfer options. There's off-roster homegrowns. The off-roster homegrowns. We talked about Robert Tredain as the off-roster homegrown. They can appear in MLS matches via short-term agreements. So that's a little bit more on the roster building. That's a little bit more on what the Chicago Fire are going to look like for the remainder of the season and into the postseason. And I am going to go get a glass of water, catch my breath, probably watch some of the new Futurama season, and pass out for the night and get ready for my soccer Saturday. Youth soccer in the morning, Premier League in the afternoon, and then MLS all night. And with that, I thank you all for tuning in. Let's go Fire.